Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We have 12 bills today and the order is posted outside correctly. We're going to begin with 659. This is Comptroller. Secretary. And I think Secretary Grady. Yeah, please.
Great, thanks.
Heavy hitting team.
We're all here.
Well, you're here, so why don't you give us the exact number since you all know it?
It's not all bad. We're still projecting revenue growth of 2.1% this year and a little over 1% next year, but
Okay, what was the write down?
477.
477?
Mhm.
Split between 2 years. How?
Mostly next year.
Yeah.
400 next year.
Mostly next year.
About 400 next year. Okay, very good.
Great.
We care about these things here.
We all do. Yeah. Mr. Chair, it's great to see you back.
Good to be back.
Yes, members of the committee, wonderful to be with you here today. And thank you for giving me the time to discuss Senate Bill 659, which is our bill to begin the process to modernize our outdated statewide accounting system. I'm excited to be back in B&T, and I'm grateful to be here presenting this bill in partnership with Treasurer Davis and Secretary Grady. I hope it indicates to you that we are a team. We are working on moving this forward for the good of the entire state. And I know that you've heard me talk about our outdated technology before, but today is about charting the path forward and beginning the partnership to improve our systems. The technology that we are talking about today is our state's Financial Management Information System, also known as FEMIS. Our system is one of the oldest financial management systems in the country. It's just, in fact, just 4 other states rely on a similar legacy system. The system is critical to the functioning of our state as it is the backbone for so many functions of our government. Beyond accounting, this is the system we use for our budgeting, our purchasing and inventory applications, payment processing, and it's even the program we use to produce reports, including those relating to minority business enterprise and small business reserve funds, which are, of course, high priority to all of us. Further, payments to anyone receiving funds from the state, including small businesses, contractors, and nonprofits, all go through this system. I know you're well aware of what can happen when outdated systems cause issues and delays in payments. Many of these nonprofits and small businesses rely on timely reimbursement payments from the state to provide services, pay their employees, and keep their doors open. And our outdated system makes that process harder. Overall, our system runs on outdated mainframe technology as opposed to modern cloud computing systems that are now standard in nearly every other state. Programming on these legacy systems is done in an obsolete computer language called COBOL. It has become very difficult to hire programmers to work in the system, and it is extremely expensive to maintain the mainframe. So based on the examples set by so many other states, we have an excellent opportunity to learn best practices and create recommendations to ensure Maryland has a top-of-the-line system that works for businesses, government entities, nonprofit agencies, and more. The state of Maryland needs to modernize existing technologies to effectively process the volume of financial data it's responsible for. This bill, with our attached amendments, creates a directive of the General Assembly for us, our agencies, to work together to provide recommendations to the Governor and General Assembly about the best path forward to modernize. Our financial management system is critical infrastructure, and we need to begin a thoughtful process to replace the outdated FEMA system to guarantee our continued service to vendors, businesses, and nonprofits who rely on timely payments and to balance the state's books every year. So I look forward to working with all of you, to our partners on this critical project, and I urge a favorable report on SB 659. Thank you. Do you want to turn it over? There we go.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. Helene Grady, I'm Secretary of Budget and Management, and I am really enthusiastic about being here to support Comptroller Learman, Treasurer Davis, and the team on the kickoff for this really important project. DBM is enthusiastically supportive of the effort to replace our financial management system, and also very supportive and impressed with the governance structure as proposed and laid out in this bill. Just a few weeks on the job now, I can share that there have been multiple instances already where it's been sort of brought to my attention, the extent to which our financial management hygiene, our ability to plan and monitor and support the government in the way we need to is really significantly hindered by our close to obsolete technology. And it's been one of probably the biggest surprises for me so far on the job, and can't emphasize enough how important I think this effort is, and that I think this bill and the governance structure that it represents will set us up well for a successful design and implementation for future state. Thanks.
Thank you. You have my written testimony. Madam Comptroller and Madam Secretary said it as well as it can be said, so I'll just say me too.
Spoken like a true former chair. Yep. Thank you. Doesn't reach. Thank you.
So switch seats.
Oh, thank you.
Comptroller Learman, thank you for bringing this important piece of legislation forward. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Tanya Araya. I'm the Director of Programs at Turnaround, Inc., a nonprofit agency that serves survivors of human trafficking, intimate partner violence, and sexual assault. Turnaround was founded in 1978 and serves both Baltimore City, County, and Howard County. Last fiscal year, our staff fielded more than 13,000 calls from the community and served 4,000 individuals with critically needed services. The demand for our services increased more than 300% during the pandemic and has yet to return to pre-pandemic figures. During the pandemic, we also faced serious economic challenges as agencies around us were closing because of the economic downturn. We were determined, however, to keep our doors open and with no layoffs. We relied on our funders heavily to get us through this tough period as we were existing from invoice to invoice. Nonprofits like Turnaround are mainly funded through reimbursable grants. Each month, we expend hundreds of thousands of dollars on payroll and assistance in emergency shelter and direct assistance to survivors fleeing violence and trying to start their lives over. We sometimes wait more than 60 days to get reimbursed by the state. Last December, for example, we were owed nearly $500,000 by state and local funders in delayed payments. At the same time, many nonprofits were drafting furlough policies as we heard about surplus funds. Nonprofits contend with serious outcomes with just one late payment, as services are sometimes denied or delayed to survivors who are incredibly vulnerable community members. Utilizing enhanced technology to ensure the sustainability of our state service providers is necessary for the safety of those who are abused in the state of Maryland. I request a favorable decision for this bill, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, and thank you to the comptroller for this legislation. My name is Callie Shumitz. I'm with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, and we support Senate Bill 659 because we think it's really critical that the state make this project a priority. The risks of continuing to rely on such outdated technology for a core function of state government are very clear. The state government is a vital part of our state's economy as it employs a lot of people and purchases a lot of goods and services from Maryland businesses and nonprofits. And as you just heard, delays in payments can cause really serious challenges for vendors and nonprofit organizations that are counting on the state to pay them in a timely fashion. Unlike most businesses, the state government also has a lot of financial transparency requirements because we all have an interest in knowing how the state is using our shared resources and monitoring how those things are going. It's important that our state's accounting systems are able to adhere to those requirements and evolve as those standards and reporting requirements change over time. So while we think it is very important that Maryland replace this outdated system as soon as possible. It's also important to do it right. So we think the process outlined in Senate Bill 659 involving all the relevant stakeholders is a reasonable first step to ensure that this really massive undertaking gets the attention and planning it deserves, and that the new system serves the unique needs of our state agencies well. So with that, I would ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 659. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Several, so Robin McKinney and Sheila Dixon both had to leave, but they have written testimony submitted. I'm not sure if there's anybody else.
Frame for, what's the effective date for this? Is there a time frame?
Well, the sort of,
Because I see where you all are going, this is a requirement for all the agencies.
yes, so the time frame will be several years to move to a new system, right? We'll have to go through a full procurement to decide which system we want to bring in. And then we'll have to go through the implementation, which of course will take quite some time because the FEMA system that we have right now has interfaces with so many agencies, the actual
Right.
like hookups with all the other agencies. So we'll have to redo all of that. So it will take several years. And we will be working with all of the agencies along the way. Yep.
And so are you all going to get back to us to talk to us about
Yes.
how you're doing, your timeline? Have you set a timeline in which you can come back to talk to us about your progress?
So this bill requires us to submit reports to you regularly, every 6 months, I believe, so that we are keeping the General Assembly abreast of what we're working on.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
Should I stay? I have one more. Should I stay here? Okay.
Oh, is Kevin Canal here? Did you want to testify?
Oh, Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll be very, very brief. MACO is in strong support of Senate Bill 659. We did attach just I think as a friendly amendment, just to make sure, because local governments interface so much with the state and its financial systems, we just wanted to make sure that local input would be considered by the council. Sounds like this is going to be more of a collaborative effort, so I'm very confident that local input will be considered. So with that, it's a great bill. We support the comptroller in her efforts to modernize the system and ask for a favorable report, and just to make sure that local governments do have input in the process.
Very good, thank you. Benson's mic's on. Okay, 660. Madam
Great.
Comptroller?
Yes. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm glad to be going back to back today to discuss another bill of mine, SB 660, which will create the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate within the Comptroller's Office. This is really a bill about responsiveness and ensuring that we're doing the best for Marylanders. Over the last 2 years, everywhere I traveled, I heard a common refrain when it came to tax administration. Taxpayers wanted to know that if they had an issue, there was an easy place and somebody that they could talk to in government who could help solve their problem and guide them through the complexities of the Maryland tax code. SB 660 creates the Office of the State Taxpayer Advocate and creates support and structures within the office to be the responsive, customer-facing support that's flexible and able to adapt to the needs of the taxpayer. The Comptroller's Office has many functions and capabilities, but one of the most important is, of course, to be a constituent service agency. Tax collection can be intimidating and confusing for many people, and too often people are stuck and don't know where to turn. The problem is especially prevalent in lower income, minority, and in non-native English-speaking communities. Taxpaying Marylanders in need of the most support from their state are all too often left not only without it, but not knowing where to look for it. So establishing the Office of the State Taxpayer Advocate within the Comptroller's Office will ensure that all Marylanders have access to an equitable tax administration system and improved customer service experience. So this bill will establish that office, which includes customer-facing staff, as well as an electronic portal on the comptroller's website where taxpayers can interact directly with the taxpayer advocate and find more resources and information. The office will be tasked with resolving taxpayer issues, in addition to making sure that they're working on complex tax problems. In addition, and very importantly, the taxpayer advocate will be responsible for identifying systemic problems experienced by taxpayers and representing taxpayers' interests within the comptroller's office by formulating policies and procedures to better serve the people of Maryland. A study of best practices from around the country informs this legislation. More than half the states, including our neighbors of Pennsylvania, Virginia, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia, as well as the federal government, have an office of the taxpayer advocate that's committed to helping taxpayers and their elected representatives utilize the resources within the office of the comptroller to resolve tax problems. So I'm here today to ensure that we bring the innovation shown in other states to Maryland and create this office. I urge a favorable report of SB 660. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Pablo Blanc. I am the Director of Immigrant Integration at CASA, the largest immigrant rights organization in Maryland, the Mid-Atlantic region, and now growing nationally. We represent over 120,000 Black and Latino low-income immigrants and working-class families. We run VITA sites, free tax preparation in Baltimore City, Prince George County, and Montgomery County. We help over 1,000 Marylanders to prepare taxes for free, and we provide services in English, Spanish, and French. CASA is especially proud to support SB 660, which will be a critical step ensuring our most vulnerable Marylanders have their voice heard and will also help them to better navigate tax issues. CASA strongly supports the state's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this bill will allow us to continue our efforts in support of all Marylanders. We all could use some extra guidance when it comes to taxes, and this new office created under this bill will be instrumental in ensuring that newly arrived Marylanders, as long as long-time Marylanders seeking to be in accordance with the law, will find help, not only in nonprofit organizations such as CASA, but also, and most importantly, in the agency that has the most knowledge to deal with those issues. So CASA urges a favorable report. Thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and Budget and Tax Committee members. It's a pleasure to be here today as the voice of many Marylanders. My name is Giovante Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals. Our 2,000 CPAs and tax professional members represent more than 700,000 Maryland residents. The Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals supports Bill 660. The Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals members have heard many clients express how an advocate office would benefit them when they needed an advocate most. Many Maryland residents presume their accountant or tax professional will help them navigate tax issues. A Maryland taxpayer advocate office would be a valuable resource for Maryland's taxpayers. We need to protect taxpayers' rights and help ensure that taxpayers are treated fairly and that their rights are not violated. Comptroller Lehrman envisions a customer service approach to tax administration, which the establishment of the taxpayer advocate office could enhance. This office would serve as a point of contact for taxpayers with issues with their tax affairs, providing guidance and assistance to help them navigate complex tax rules and procedures. In contrast, the comptroller's office can increase transparency and improve tax administration by identifying problems and implementing changes that benefits the taxpayers. Overall, a taxpayer advocate office is important within the state because it serves as a voice for taxpayers, helps protect their rights, and improves tax administration by providing assistance, resolving disputes, and increasing transparency. A taxpayer advocate office can help ensure that taxpayers are treated fairly and their voices are heard. Therefore, we urge a favorable report on SB 660.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Callie Shumitz with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy here in support of SB 660. We support this legislation because fair administration of the state's tax laws is a really important component of an effective and equitable tax system. We see two main benefits from this. First, it ensures that Marylanders who encounter tax problems have someone to turn to who understands the laws and options available to the taxpayer to resolve the issue. And we think this is particularly important for the lowest income Marylanders who might end up in situations where they make a mistake on their taxes or owe a tax that they can't afford to pay all at once. For example, I think about people who are working for services like Uber or DoorDash and are classified as independent contractors, and that makes their taxes a lot more complicated to file, but they also aren't being paid enough to afford to hire a professional tax preparer. So that increases the risk that they make a mistake or end up with a big tax bill that they weren't prepared for and might need assistance. Second, I appreciate Comptroller Learman highlighting this. We think it's really the ability of the office to identify tax administration issues or barriers facing Maryland taxpayers would be very beneficial, things that could be addressed through changes to regulations and processes or through legislation. One example we've seen with this, with the National Taxpayer Advocate with the IRS, has identified the exceedingly high rate of low income recipients of the earned income tax credit who are audited compared to the rates of audits for taxpayers and other income groups. So that's something that they've flagged for Congress and that can be addressed. We think expanding the office and the current services available to taxpayers will make it more clear to Marylanders where they can go for help and ensure that the office has the staff resources to meet taxpayers' needs. So we'd ask for a favorable report on SB 660. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gazzoni and members of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. I am Tammy Bresnahan. I'm the Director of Advocacy for ARP Maryland. ARP Maryland and its almost 900,000 members, thank you for allowing us to testify on this important piece of legislation that was brought to you by the Comptroller's Office. Just for a little background, last year, 774 ARP Foundation tax aid volunteers helped more than 40,000 Maryland residents claim $27 million in federal refunds and $2.7 million in Maryland refunds at 127 sites in Maryland, including senior centers, libraries, and convenient locations. And one of the things that they say is when there's problems that they cannot resolve, they find it difficult to find someone to speak to. And we believe that this bill will completely help that void. ARP believes that states should increase support for taxpayer assistance programs such as tax counseling for the elderly and taxpayer advocate programs that this bill requires. An advocate located within the Comptroller's Office could help Marylanders with income tax assistance and other related questions and concerns. Just for a side, I was just looking at social media and a friend of mine asked, do I have to pay a tax on my mother who she opened an estate? And I was thinking, boy, if we had this bill, I'd tell her to call the Comptroller's Office. So we ask you for a favorable report for Senate Bill 660.
You can still call us.
It's kind of leaning over there. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Lawson. I'm a CPA and chair of the State Tax Committee of the Maryland Association of CPAs. We're an association of over 8,000 CPA members here in Maryland. For many years, our State Tax Committee has expressed support for the creation of a taxpayer advocate in Maryland. We recognize and appreciate the support services provided by the current Taxpayer Services Division, which includes the Ombudsman and Practitioner Helpline. They're staffed by a group of dedicated and hardworking employees. However, we know their resources are constrained and their functions are limited. And important to note, they cannot advocate for taxpayers in developing solutions to an issue. CPAs urge your support for establishing a taxpayer advocate division for 5 key reasons. 1, expert assistance in resolving complex tax issues or disputes. There are circumstances where issues and problems can't be addressed or resolved through normal channels. These situations may result in financial difficulties and additional barriers to the taxpayer. Currently, there's no single point of contact in the Comptroller's Office to assist, identify, track, and report systematic or policy issues that may be addressed through administrative or legislative action. Second, timely resolution of issues. As an independent entity, the taxpayer advocate will assist taxpayers who have been unable to resolve their issues within the regular channels of problem resolution. Even at times CPAs have issues with the Comptroller's Office and would like to have the advocate for our clients. It's an even greater imperative for taxpayers who don't have the means to hire a CPA to help guide them through the system. Third, protection of taxpayer rights. Fourth, to serve as a mediator or intermediary. Fifth, to identify systematic problems or issues. As CPAs, it's important, we believe it's important for lawmakers to consider the perspective of the taxpayer and the tax preparer, or as tax laws are considered. So again, on behalf of the 8,000 CPA members, we ask that you respectfully request a favorable report for Senate Bill 660.
Great bill. I'm for it. But the idea is great. I can see why it's valuable internally to have this covered. But help me just for a taxpayer out there. I don't know who to call at the controller's office. Or maybe the legislators talking to our constituents. If we do this, should we say your first call should be the taxpayer advocate, or your first call should be other taxpayer services in the controller's office?
It's a great question. The first call that you all will send your constituents to will be 1-800-MD Tax Help. And they'll be, depending on the level of, the complexity of the situation, they'll either be directed to the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate or to Taxpayer Services. So Taxpayer Services Division will have a sort of easier, oh yes, we can help you, on the phone with that, or, sort of very simple things. Taxpayer Advocate is more advanced, more complex challenges, and also challenges that might end up being systemic, that happen over and over again. And then that Taxpayer Advocate office can report them up to us so that we can solve them. Thank you. Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members. Great to see you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Melvin Thompson. I represent the Restaurant Association of Maryland, and we support this legislation. We often have restaurants with very complex sales and use tax questions, and we often have to contact the comptroller's office. Sometimes we're connected with an auditor, which isn't always ideal for answering our questions, but we think this is a great bill. We applaud the comptroller for bringing it forward, and we're happy to support it. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Senator Sarah Elfreth here to present Senate Bill 650, which might sound a little familiar to this committee. We dealt with a similar bill last year. I'll just set the stage and say that the idea for this bill inspiration came out of my district, Annapolis and Edgewater, experiencing not one, but two tornadoes over the course of a year and a king flood, the third highest flood on record. Unfortunately, my district is not alone in experiencing what feels like more frequent and more severe natural disasters. The chair's own district or nearby in his county, Ellicott City, saw two 1,000-year floods over the course of 2 years. We're seeing massive flooding events on the Eastern Shore. Unfortunately, this is an issue that we're going to keep dealing with. So last year, when I brought a similar bill to this committee, we decided to localize it, and we used our SWMOBA funds in Anne Arundel County alone to respond so that we could provide necessary and frankly rapid aid to our small businesses that were impacted by a natural disaster. But we knew we needed a statewide approach, which is why in that same bill, we put together a task force of local emergency managers from across the state to spend the interim thinking about what is the appropriate statewide response. We know these storms are happening, they will happen more frequently, and they will happen more severely. And frankly, our current system of response from a state perspective, and I know I have the Secretary of MDEM here, and this is not derogatory at MDEM. This is we need to be smarter, faster, and more strategic in our response to localized disasters. So that's where we came to this bill, Mr. Chair. It's the recommendations of that work group that again had representation from, I believe, all of your emergency managers from across the state. So the bill is going to do a couple of things. It's going to create the state disaster recovery fund within the Department of Emergency Management. This new fund will take the recommendations of the work group with important capabilities to benefit all Marylanders. The fund will be authorized to provide the following: disaster recovery assistance to individuals and families when a local government has submitted a request for a disaster declaration, but the federal disaster declaration is not received. That happened in Annapolis. FEMA denied our declaration. So this would be a backup plan in case that happens again. 2, assistance to local governments for repair or reconstruction of a public facility when that federal disaster declaration is not received. Low interest or no interest loans to businesses and nonprofits when a federal disaster declaration is not received. This is a lesson we took from the flood, actually. All the for-profit businesses were eligible for grants and loans. Unfortunately, the nonprofits that were hit just as hard and had the same cleanup bills were not eligible for that assistance. Assistance to individuals and families following a federal disaster declaration if there are still unmet needs, which happens quite frequently. Assistance to individuals and families following denied federal assistance if they would otherwise meet the criteria established by the fund. And finally, matching funds for assistance to individuals, state or local governmental units after a federal disaster declaration. So filling in the gaps of our current response strategy. And to do so, as the bill is amended, and I believe we have amendments in your laptops, to do so and fund this, we're going to abolish the catastrophic event account. This might sound a little drastic, but let me just say that we tried to utilize the catastrophic event account after my district experienced that tornado. It's incredibly cumbersome. It has to go through the Legislative Policy Committee. It will take weeks, if not months, to get the money out the door. And that is the exact last thing you want when we have a natural disaster. So abolish that account and then move the money that's currently in the account, the 10.1 million, into this new, much more nimble, much more strategic fund. So at the end of the day, with the amendments, this should be net neutral on the budget. Number 3, it authorizes the fund to be used if the governor has declared a state of emergency or if a local emergency management organization requests assistance from the fund. Again, this is to be more nimble when we have localized natural disasters. 4, it requires annual reporting from MDEM on the use of the fund, as well as on the number of disaster or emergency declarations statewide and locally. So this is going to ensure that we retain great oversight on the use of the fund, but also lets us better track the disaster declarations and the damage assessments related to each declaration. Number 5, it retains the ability for the governor to transfer funds from the fund by budget amendment to an appropriate unit of state government. And 6, it retains the ability of the governor to transfer funds to the federal government shutdown employee assistance loan fund in the event of a federal government shutdown. In 2019, this General Assembly passed the Federal Shutdown Paycheck Protection Act in the case of a federal shutdown. So we're still retaining this fund's ability to be utilized in that way should we experience another federal shutdown. So with that, Mr. Chair, you're going to hear from people who were on the ground responding to the natural disasters experienced in my district. I'm really happy to have one of our members of our city council here with us today. It's my sincere hope that none of our districts ever again have to experience a 1,000-year flood or 2 tornadoes in 1 year or any such issue, but we know that's just not going to happen. And we know we need to do better and be more responsive and more nimble. And we hope that Senate Bill 650 is part of the answer in ensuring that our communities can be kept, frankly, housed, to ensuring our constituents have somewhere to go if they lose the roof over their heads, and ensuring that our small businesses can continue to thrive even through a natural disaster. So with that, Mr. Chair, with the amendments that we presented, that we've worked on hand in hand with MDEM, I'd like to thank the secretary and with the governor's office. I respectfully request a favorable committee report with the amendments. Thank you.
Want to defer to the secretary?
Can you, thank you for, can you describe or can you define what we're talking about here when we talk about the word disaster? What would we consider a disaster?
That is a
It's a
perfect question for the
tornado?
secretary.
What else?
I think it's any event that overwhelms a local jurisdiction. So, and when we talk about local jurisdiction, in this case, it would be the city of Annapolis. They were overwhelmed. They asked the county for assistance. That's Anne Arundel County. They're overwhelmed and they need additional assistance on top of that. And then we have methodologies to try and bring in assets and resources to support them. But this particular bill would give us some of the financial recapture of those types of resources, as well as assistance to local families.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That helps.
Does that take off my time? Oh, okay. Just for the record, my name is Russell Strickland. I'm the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and to the Chair and the Vice Chair and the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I think this is very, very historical. Simply because the state government currently has no comprehensive mechanism to provide disaster recovery assistance to individuals, businesses, or local governments if federal aid is not available. Simply put, our current disaster relief policy leaves many of our neighbors behind. And I would relate this to the governor's position on leave no one behind. This bill would certainly help us in that direction. This bill directly reflects the recommendations of a comprehensive state disaster relief fund working group, which Senator McElrath mentioned. It's come forth from really the grassroots of all of those active in the state emergency management community. And many of the disasters that Maryland has do not reach the federal threshold. And in the past, we've had only about maybe 3 individual assistance disasters from the federal government. And they were events like Isabel, Sandy, and COVID. So, and we know too, with the predictions as things move forward, that we're going to have more and more of those kind of events. Current state assistance programs are not funded and are not well coordinated in the aftermath of disasters. And also with this, when combined with a risk reduction strategy that invests in hazard mitigation for our communities, this bill will significantly increase Maryland's resilience in the face of local disasters. We'll be able to collect the data that's necessary, that required in this bill, to better understand the impacts so we can plan better for the future. And that data collection will support disaster risk reduction decision-making at state and local levels. So in conclusion, we urge a favorable report on the proposed bill with the amendments of the State Disaster Recovery Fund.
Good afternoon. My name is Rhonda Pendell Charles, and I'm the Alderwoman, the Councilwoman of Ward 3 for the City of Annapolis, and I'm also the Chairperson of the City Council's Public Safety Standing Committee. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. I'm here today not only to voice my support for SB 650, but to also voice the support of the individuals and families in my community that were impacted by the 2021 Annapolis tornado. It was in Ward 3, and more specifically, the parole community of Annapolis, where I live, that the majority of the damage occurred from this devastating incident. The devastation of this storm included the complete loss of homes and businesses and resulted in over $7 million in property damage and economic loss within my ward alone. To this day, there are still families struggling to recover from this disaster due to the lack of federal assistance and the inability for current state programs to meet the recovery needs of the disaster survivors. As with many families in Ward 3 and parole, including my own, our residency and our footprint have consistently existed in parole since the Civil War. Many of the residents impacted by this event have voiced to me their concerns regarding the challenges and obstacles that exist in obtaining disaster relief assistance, and even more so for our more vulnerable and underserved communities. Without a federal disaster declaration made, there are very few avenues for those living on fixed incomes or those with lower incomes to receive assistance to help them repair and rebuild their lives. Additionally, my constituents have shared their stories, provided testimony and their lived experiences to the state's summer study work group, which helped to offer recommendations for the establishment of this state disaster recovery fund. The creation of a fund that can be accessed by local governments for local disasters is very much needed. It will provide the necessary means for Maryland residents, including residents like that of parole, to access the necessary recovery resources when all local resources have been exhausted and a federal disaster declaration is not granted. With the growing number of localized disasters occurring throughout Maryland, the programs administered by state and local emergency management departments are becoming more vital. Having a fund that supports these programs will help ensure all Maryland residents, families, business, and nonprofits have access to the appropriate resources to recover when a disaster strikes. Thank you for your time and attention, and hopefully for a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Kevin Simmons. I'm the Director of the Office of Emergency Management for the City of Annapolis. I offer this testimony to voice my support for Senate Bill 650, a bill that provides local units of government such as the City of Annapolis with the capability to access state recovery funding in the aftermath of a localized disaster. On September 1st, 2021, an unprecedented Category EF2 tornado struck the city of Annapolis, resulting in over 100 homes, businesses, and local nonprofit organizations within Annapolis and Anne Arundel County being damaged or completely destroyed. The Parole neighborhood, an historic Black and Brown community, was one of the hardest hit areas in Annapolis. Many of the impacted residents are seniors living on a fixed income or families living in generational housing with incomes below the poverty level. And many of the homes were uninsured or underinsured. As a result, the ability of the community to start the recovery process was significantly delayed because we didn't have any dedicated funds to assist individuals and households after local resources were exhausted. Today, we still continue assisting parole residents a year and 6 months later after the tornado event. As an experienced first responder, incident management team coordinator, deputy fire chief, and an executive director within the field of emergency management for the past 40 years, I can attest to the benefits of Senate Bill 650 being summarized in 3 points, key points. 1, the bill will provide disaster recovery relief for small Maryland cities and towns, as well as the counties and Baltimore City. 2, the disaster recovery fund will be managed and administered by the Maryland Department of Emergency Management and local appointed emergency managers that are industry experts in disaster recovery. And finally, the disaster recovery fund will focus on the recovery of lower income and underserved communities, ensuring no one is left behind. Thank you for your time today.
Greetings to the chair and members of the committee. My name is Preeti Emmerich, and I am the director of the Anne Arundel County Office of Emergency Management, and I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 650. What happened in Anne Arundel and Annapolis shone a spotlight on a common problem in the state, a lack of dedicated funding to help communities that experience micro disasters. A smaller scale incident does not mean the effects are any less devastating to the community. FEMA does not fund small disasters. The federal system does not work in our uncertain times of climate change when there's more severe storms and local impacts. The dedicated work group that was created to study the development of the fund was comprised of many different sectors of the state. You had big counties, you had small counties, you had municipalities, and they all agreed on one thing: we can do better. The work group focused on 3 areas. Number 1, equity and inclusion. No community will get left behind. Number 2, timeliness. The communities will get immediate funding instead of waiting for months and months for a decision to be made or a program to start up. 3, whole community gaps. Even with a federal declaration, there are still gaps that exist in funding. FEMA and federal guidelines have restrictive criteria on what the money can be spent for. The state needs to lead the example of preparedness for communities and businesses in these uncertain times. For all of these reasons, I request a favorable report on Senate Bill 650. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in strong support of Senate Bill 650, Much of what I was going to say has already been said. I will say that although every disaster begins and ends at the local level, it's critical that we have a strong state and federal partnership. I think what we've seen is that we have some gaps in the funding that's available right after a disaster, which is important to get that money out the door to residents, businesses, nonprofits, as was mentioned earlier, to make sure that they can get back on their feet quickly. So this is a priority for MACO. I really appreciate Senator Elfreth. And I'll say that when our emergency managers brought this idea, we knew we would have to do our homework. So we got the smartest people we could find in the room. They came up with the product that's in front of you now. It's a great bill. The amendments take care of the fiscal issue. So we'd urge your favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Mead. I'm the Emergency Management Planner for the City of Annapolis Office of Emergency Management, and I worked as the Recovery Specialist and Disaster Case Manager for the city in the aftermath of the 2021 Annapolis tornado. I'm here also in support of Senate Bill 650, which not only establishes a state disaster recovery fund, but also allows for a portion of the fund to be used to finance disaster case management services. I believe the funding of disaster case management services is an important part of this bill, as it is a necessary component in helping disaster survivors recover in a more effective and equitable manner. Currently, when a local disaster occurs without a federal declaration, the ability for local governments to increase their capacity for disaster case management workers is very limited. Having a state mechanism to fund local disaster case management services helps to ensure our local residents are able to access crucial support programs and work through their long road to recovery. While working as a disaster case manager following the tornado, I was able to witness firsthand the challenges and obstacles that our more vulnerable and underserved communities face. Over the past year and a half, residents have described to me their issues and concerns with the current patchwork of recovery assistant programs being offered. The applications are complex, the amount of documentation can be overwhelming, and the feasibility and accessibility to submit applications can be difficult. These residents have described challenges with accessing state disaster housing programs, negotiating with their insurance companies, and navigating state bureaucracy, all of which has led to financial hardships that they're still suffering from today. I believe this bill will help to rectify these issues by streamlining the state's ability to support additional caseworkers who can then better help survivors navigate these tasks. I respectfully ask that you provide a favorable recommendation for this bill and support the establishment of the State Disaster Recovery Fund, which can also help fund disaster case management resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a good bill, and it's something that I believe we should already have in place for the state of Maryland.
Me
So
too.
I appreciate that bill. And I see the order, the Secretary of Emergency Management reports to the Governor and the General Assembly. But what is like the definition of like a declared local disaster, and like what level are we looking at? Because I know at times there's certain levels of disaster, and I know, again, the federal government will not always jump in there.
Right.
And I know at times we need to.
Right.
So what type of level are we looking at, and like to an extreme or to a place where we can say that this is an emergency and we need to do that?
Well, I'll start and then I'm gonna let the secretary fill in any gaps. I think just from our on the ground experience with a few of these in the last few years, which is really unfortunate to say, we're gonna see the smaller storms. So the tornado we experienced started in Anne Arundel County and then hopped over to Cecil County, which is why you'll see a letter of support from the Cecil County executive as well. It just wasn't large enough for the governor to declare that state of emergency, but still, as was mentioned, significant property damage, folks who were unhoused, small businesses that are still, there's still tarps if you go down West Street in Annapolis. So that's the challenge here. Now, not 2 months later, we had the King flood that impacted my district, Senator Bailey's district. Because that was declared a state of emergency, we got the money out the door within a week. If y'all go down to Storm Brothers, right at City Dock, that is still open today. The owner of that company told us, because we were able to get immediate, within a week, funding out the door to help with the flood mitigation and mold remediation. So we were able to act quickly in that circumstance because of the state level, but not at the tornado level because it was more localized. But I'm gonna let the secretary explain the levels.
Well, and it's almost defined per event to some degree, but the bottom line is that per the law, any local jurisdiction has the ability to request assistance from us. And that assistance can be in the form of resources and assets that we would bring in to actually help with the true response into recovery area that we would either bring in from the state level or we'd bring in from other county, local jurisdictional level. What this is really addressing more than anything is once we get into that recovery area. And the recovery for us means that's when we're getting people into safe places to live, whether it be for a short term or a longer term, make sure they get back into their community as much as possible and into a normal function of life. So a threshold, which is what I think you're really kind of shooting for, is that with the federal government, in order for us to receive a federal disaster declaration, one of the requirements is for public assistance, and public assistance is our infrastructure and things like that. We have to have a minimal of $10.9 million worth of damage estimated. For individual assistance, which I see this bill as more of an immediate help to people who are in trouble and need immediate help, is about 9.1 million at the federal level. So what we're looking at with this bill is that we have the smaller events that are under these kind of thresholds. We know we're not going to be able to receive a federal declaration, but yet we have a gap between what our local jurisdictions can provide and what the federal government could provide. This will be the opportunity for the state to step in and offer that type of assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Elfreth, for bringing this bill forward. I was asked by a colleague or a member of the Prince George's County delegation to cross-file a bill, pre-file a bill. And that bill focused on individuals, not necessarily jurisdictions. He is the area that he covers is in the heart of Prince George's, the Cheverly area, and that constantly floods. Had a conversation with MDEM's dynamic staff. I see Miss Sierra back there. At the end of the day, I believe that this gets to the crux of what we're looking at. When you have the federal government or the state, not the governor not stepping in and declaring a disaster, we have families that are at their wits' end. They don't know what to do. And so this will be, as a matter of fact, that piece of legislation was such at a wits' end that they were looking at housing to come in. And but I think this will keep us on the right path to helping those municipalities. Prince George's has like 27 of them. I have two municipalities in Calvert County that are right on the shore, North Beach and Chesapeake Beach. One of those tornadoes you're talking about, hopped from Prince George's over, and so we never know. What we do know is we're having them too often. I think most importantly, I'd like to commend you all for your work group putting it together because I think there are a lot of needs out here and folks need to know where to go. So thank you all.
Question following, I'm a co-sponsor. I'm all into this. I'm really glad, Senator Elfreth, you've taken the lead on this. I still am trying to clarify how small is small. The reason I'm asking is I live in one of those Prince George's municipalities that last summer had a mini tornado through my neighborhood and the neighborhood right next door. I had 3 huge trees in my backyard come down in different directions. One of them totaled my neighbor's house and made it uninhabitable. And it was like everyone in the neighborhood was helping and we did everything we could. How small can it be? This was 2 neighborhoods that just for 20 minutes got whacked out. Would this be useful in that kind of situation?
My answer would be it could be, because we would need to talk, if this goes back to case management, is to work with the owner of that home and work with the municipality and the county to see where they're stretched and cannot meet the needs of that individual.
I understand. Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you very much. Great bill. Having to be a co-sponsor, like every part about it. I understand the federal declarations representing St. Mary's and Calvert. We have had this considerable times. Worked with you, Mr. Secretary. Only question I have, how quickly can this money be available to our constituents who, when we pull out there to where their house was, it's gone? And I know we have to wait when it's the undercurrent. I just want to know how quickly we can apply this.
Oh, let me take a shot at that. It will be faster than FEMA. I would say it will probably be faster than most insurance companies because we do have fully insured homes that are unoccupied from the tornado, and they're still not back in them. But it will be something that we'll be able to get out the door within an extremely quick manner to get them to safety and where they can start to rebuild their life. Now, I'm hesitant to say 24 hours, 6 minutes, 5 seconds, whatever it might be. We're not going to have anything quite that fast. But one of the things we are charged with is coming up with the policies to administer this. And it will be my goal that we help people who need help immediately.
Senator, our balance here was rapid, but still, this is taxpayer money, so we need to make sure that there's appropriate checks, that's where the secretary sits.
Very good. Any other questions, or was there anyone who didn't testify yet on this? Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you.
We're going to alter the schedule slightly, and we're going to bring up 461, Senator Hershey.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. My colleague here knows we have an important bill upstairs in a few minutes. You bring my panel up with me, Mr. Vice Chair?
Please do. Bring up your whole merry band.
Hey, how are you? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Senator Steve Hershey to present Senate Bill 461, which takes additional steps to eliminating 100% of the state income tax for those Marylanders over the age of 65 and collecting Social Security benefits. And it will phase in over 6 years, beginning in 2023. This bill will establish a subtraction modification for individuals receiving Social Security benefit, starting with $10,000 in 2023 taxable income. The subtraction modification will increase in increments of $10,000 annually until it reaches $50,000 of taxable income for year 2027. The rising costs of inflation and essential necessities, including groceries, utilities, and prescription drugs, are significant concerns for millions of Marylanders, especially older and retired individuals who are living on a fixed income. This bill will allow more Maryland retirees to keep their hard-earned retirement income and to allow them to age in place in our state. Senate Bill 461 will help Maryland compete with its seniors for neighboring states, with neighboring states such as Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Virginia, all who have competitive tax codes and are labeled tax-friendly states. It's important to keep our Marylanders here in our state. They contribute to our economy, communities, and they are our volunteers. I ask for a favorable vote on Senate Bill 461.
Thank you. Pass the mic.
My name is Paul Schwartz, and I'm representing the National Active Retired Federal Employees, NARF. We strongly support passage of SB 461. Let me tell you why. Senior migration to more tax-friendly states is a real issue and should be a real concern to you in Maryland's economy. Retirees may retire to Florida for the weather, but they do not retire to Delaware or Pennsylvania for the weather. In Bankrate's July 2021 study, Maryland ranked last of the 50 states as the worst place in which to retire. After passage of the Retirement Tax Elimination Act of 2022 last session, Maryland moved up to number 44. We need to keep the momentum going and build on what we accomplished last session. According to a March 2021 study in Wallet Hub, Maryland has the third highest personal income tax burden of all the states. When Marylanders retire elsewhere, they take their tax money, buying power, and community service with them. Let me share with you one story. The story of a recently retired military couple that had 2 military pensions plus Social Security. They moved to Waldorf, Maryland, moved from Waldorf, Maryland to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and saved $24,000 in state tax. According to the latest census data, Maryland lost a population between 2020 and 2021 because of what they called out-migration. Between 2012 and 2017, Maryland lost 59,432 residents in the 65 to 74 year-old age group for an average annual loss of 11,886 seniors. Using the age distribution of seniors given in population demographics in Maryland 2020 and 2019, the average loss of seniors of all ages in Maryland is estimated to exceed more than 22,000.
Thank you very much.
I'll give just one last stat. United Van Lines National Movers Survey, 28% of those leaving Maryland cited
you.
retirement as a reason.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. I'm Tammy Bresnahan. I'm the Director of Advocacy for ARP Maryland. A key priority for our organization, including helping all Marylanders achieve financial and health security. ARP Maryland and its almost 900,000 members, thank you for allowing us to speak on behalf of this bill. And we do support Senate Bill 461. We thank Senator Hershey for introducing this important bill. They've already given you all the statistics, but older Marylanders on fixed incomes, and I stress that, truly feel the effects of inflation more than the rest of us. Maryland retirees currently pay, as you know, federal income tax, as well as significant state and local taxes, motor fuel tax, sales tax, and you've heard all of those. A vast number of older Marylanders also fully support or contribute financially to the well-being of their children, their grandchildren, as well as primary caregivers for their parents and spouses. They also feel that they have limited options for rejoining the workforce, especially over the age of 65. Within our state, Marylanders over the age of 50 create an economic impact much greater than their portion of the population. As a percentage of the state residents over 50 continues to grow, so will their contributions to our economy. According to a longevity economy, a report prepared by Oxford Economics for AARP, Marylanders 50 and older generated 39% of the state's gross domestic product, totaling $163 billion. Moreover, the report found that the state residents 50 and older made up just 36% of the Maryland's population, but supported 1.6 million or 44% of jobs across the state and 38% of state and local taxes. ARP Maryland looks forward to working with you in enacting and implementing policies like Senate Bill 461 that preserve and support the economic engine in our state and helps to ensure that older Marylanders can live their retirement with dignity and independence. We look for a favorable report on Senate Bill 461. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Senator Hershey or members of the panel? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you. My apologies. Go right ahead, Senator. You got to wave your hands.
Okay, thanks. Real quick, I was trying to keep up with your figures. And I know when we see, when we look at financially how much this bill costs and how many the revenues that we would lose. I think you said how many people left Maryland per year?
Between 2012 and 2017, lost 59,452 seniors between 65 and 74.
Now, when you did that, were you able to figure out or amortize how many millions of dollars that would have been?
I'm glad you raised that. We provided, I can't right now, but in my testimony, I included a portion of the white paper that we provided to every legislator last year that actually outlined the data. So if you're looking for data and where it came from and what the numbers are, that's in that white paper. And I included most of that in my written testimony that are submitted. So the data is there if you need to look for more data.
Okay, you don't have an idea of how many millions just off the top of your head?
No, but I will tell you this. It's a lot. The way the fiscal note always works is they look at the 5-year window of the impact on revenue by giving these people these tax breaks, but they're not looking at the long-term impact on the economy. And when those seniors leave, they are taking their money with them, their buying power, their community service, that all adds up. I mean, there are other things involved too. Even like number of congressmen we have is based on population. And if we have this steady stream of seniors leaving, and you know that they're leaving, somebody raised to me when I testified before another bill that they said, well, they know somebody who actually stayed. And that's like saying you don't believe in climate change because it snowed yesterday. This is a real problem and it has a long-term impact on our economy. And this tries to address it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I think we have 2 other witnesses. who signed up to come up to the table? Maybe we don't. Maybe they're not here. Going once, going twice. Okay, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 461. We will now go to Senate Bill 691, Senator King. And please invite up if you have panel members to join you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. Home amenity rentals are a fairly new segment of the short-term rental industry. A home amenity rental is the rental of any portion of a residential property, whether indoors or outdoors, except for bedrooms or any portion of the property intended for sleeping quarters, that is occupied by the hour for not more than 15 hours consecutively. I know, new concept. Several years ago, the General Assembly put into place a taxing scheme for short-term rentals like Airbnb. Senate Bill 691 copies this model, updates, and makes home amenity rentals as defined in the bill subject to the sales tax. We then cut and pasted exactly what's in place for the local taxing piece for short-term rentals and included it in Senate Bill 691 for home amenity rentals. The only change is that the tax rate was halved in order to take into account that home amenity rentals are usually for 2 to 3 hours, while a short-term rental is for 20+ hours. Simply put, this bill puts home amenity rentals, which are growing in popularity, on par with similar short-term rentals from a taxing standpoint. And one of the examples, because when I first started hearing about this, I thought this is nuts. You might have a swimming pool in your backyard that you want to rent out for birthday parties. Just various different ideas are coming up from people using short-term rentals. So with that, I'll turn it over to my panel and request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Ashley Bagwell, here this afternoon on behalf of Swimply in strong support of Senate Bill 691. Thank you to Senator King for introducing this bill and for her excellent explanation. Here with me this afternoon is Cameron Kilberg with Swimply. But before I turn it over to her, I just wanted to provide some brief context for the committee. For the last year, we've been working with Montgomery County to regulate home amenity rentals. And in late January, Councilmember Will Jawando introduced legislation and a zoning text amendment to do just that, using as the basis for the regulatory framework what's already in place for short-term rentals. A part of that broader framework, of course, is the taxation piece. And as y'all know, that's something that y'all have to handle because the counties aren't able to do that. And so here we are on behalf of Senate Bill 691. Again, as Senator King said, this bill simply copies what's in place for short-term rentals from a taxation standpoint with the one change that she articulated. With that, Mr. Vice Chairman, I will urge a favorable vote and I'll turn it over to Ms. Kilberg.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman, committee members, thank you for having me here today. On behalf of Swimply, I'm here to support SB 691, which would add home amenity rentals to the sales and use tax and authorizes a county or municipality to impose a home amenity rental tax. Swimply is a home amenity rental platform, which allows homeowners to share underutilized portions of their home with their neighbors by the hour. While Swimply has started with the sharing of pools, we are moving towards a platform where all underutilized spaces, which are not sleeping quarters, can be shared, be it your yard for a dog to run or sharing your garage for someone to work on their car. We are an extension of the home sharing economy. The home sharing economy has been growing and evolving since 2008, and with its state and local regulations and taxes must also continue to keep pace. Home amenity rentals do not currently meet any state or local definition for tax purposes. While they are part of the home sharing economy, they lack lodging, which makes the transient occupancy or hotel tax inapplicable. Thus, today, any local jurisdiction which wants to regulate and therefore tax home amenity rentals, much as they do short-term rentals, may not apply such a tax. This bill would change that and put home amenity rentals on the same regulatory ground as short-term rentals. As they've already pointed out, this doesn't make any policy changes, just adds the tax to the extension of the home sharing economy. So with this, we respectfully ask for your support of SB 691. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? I have one. We rarely have businesses coming in asking to impose taxes. So there's something here I'm missing.
Tax queen, tax queen.
So I can kind of say this. I mean, I think the ship has sailed on taxes a lot in these cases. I mean, the home sharing economy, Airbnb has been using the hotel tax.
Yeah.
Each state's different, but they came into fruition as a business around 2007. The taxes start coming in before 2020. And we're an extension of that. So I think when you're working with local governments to regulate it, to not have battles over whether you're legal to operate or not, the reality is taxes are part of that package. And so we've worked closely with Montgomery County, and that's something for them to help work with us. And any other county, I'm sure in the state of Maryland, will want to do this too. There's no local tax that would be applicable. So yeah, it's kind of more of the policies have shifted and the politics.
So it's
where we are
basically to
today.
try to sort of legitimize the industry and get it in a framework that it can
Yes.
grow. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think there are no other witnesses on this bill. I'm sorry, there is. Yes, Kevin Kennelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kevin Kennelly here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support of the bill with an amendment. First of all, we certainly appreciate being included in this bill. And like you said, Senator, it's good to see the industry coming forward and want to make sure that they're legitimate and regulated and taxed. We believe that the local hotel tax should apply in this circumstance. We don't think it should be halved. So we appreciate some flexibility there. This is a growing industry, a growing segment. As you heard before, this is pools. This could be music studios in someone's home, a sport court, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We just want to make sure that we don't tie our hands with this. And so we'd appreciate the flexibility and for just for consistency's sake to just apply these transactions to the local hotel tax. I think that's the easiest way to do it. And so with that, we appreciate the bill again. We appreciate the framework of the bill, and we'd ask for a favorable report with that amendment.
Thank you. Senator Elfreth.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Kevin, I just want to make sure I completely, and I know we're kind of comparing apples to oranges with Airbnbs, traditional hotels,
Right.
and this situation. I don't even know what to call it. But from my understanding in my local jurisdiction, an Airbnb is put tax at the sales tax 6% that comes to the state's general fund. And then on top of it, if the local jurisdiction has opted in, their hotel tax that will stay obviously in that local economy for the most part.
Mhm.
So are you saying that you want the ability to do both, or you think that only the local hotel tax and not the state sales tax should apply in this circumstance?
Certainly the state sales tax, and I think that's uniform across the board. And so we'd like to apply the local hotel tax here to be uniform across the board at the local level as well.
Instead of the 50%?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Although
you
we
very-
appreciate that very much, we just think we'd like the flexibility there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's half a loaf from your
That's
perspective.
right, yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that does now conclude the hearing, but not Senator King. We now go to Senate Bill 692.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could have my
Yeah,
panel
please.
come up with me. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the Maryland General Assembly has passed many pieces of legislation that support greener technologies. And last year, we passed a grant program to encourage the purchase of medium and heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles. That grant program ends in 2027. Senate Bill 692 will expand on last year's legislation by providing a credit against the corporate income tax for the purchase of zero and hybrid emissions mobile machinery for use in the taxpayer's business or rental or lease to the general public. Currently, the upfront cost of zero emission and hybrid machinery is more than that of traditional gas and diesel powered vehicles. This legislation will provide an incentive to companies to make an investment, zero emission and hybrid machinery. This credit will sunset on December 31st, 2032, when prices for zero emission equipment should reach scale. Mr. Chair, I do have a few technical amendments that I would like to offer on this legislation, and I will get them to the committee council as soon as I can. And if we're serious about making the transition to greener technologies, we need to provide meaningful and comprehensive incentives. And this legislation will encourage businesses to transition to zero emission fleets and I ask for a favorable report.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Natasha Mayu here from Canning and Associates on behalf of United Rental in support of Senate Bill 692. So I do want to thank Senator King for sponsoring this bill. The goal here is to help advance the purchase of hybrid and zero emission heavy construction equipment. It aligns with the direction that the state is moving towards greener energy, greener vehicles, and greener equipment. This is a new and developing technology, especially as it comes to heavy construction equipment. So you'll hear from my client, Ed Noonan at United Rental, about the uncertainty and costs companies face when it comes to buying such new equipment, and how a bill like this can incentivize companies to purchase greener, more environmentally friendly equipment. Ultimately, this gives consumers the opportunity to use and purchase this equipment. I will point out that the bill does have the sunset. And again, it recognizes that the incentive isn't forever, but just to help get the ball rolling in this market. And so with that, I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 692.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ed Noonan. I'm with United Rentals. We are a large equipment rental company with a significant presence here in Maryland. We operate from 20 locations and have approximately 375 associates. Today, some in the rental industry are piloting or testing zero emissions equipment. As with any new technology, acceptance and adoption will take some time and education. Manufacturers are just starting to develop and introduce this type of equipment, and it's expensive. As with any new technology, the cost of zero emission piece of equipment is much higher than a comparable gas or diesel piece of equipment. Senate Bill 692 provides a tax credit for the purchase of this equipment. The bill also is intended to apply to companies with rental locations in Maryland, employing people in Maryland, and paying taxes in Maryland. Tax credit provided under 692 will help mitigate the significant upfront cost of purchasing zero emissions equipment and will make the rental of zero emissions equipment more competitive with comparable gas or diesel equipment. This in turn will provide a better opportunity for end users to test out the new zero emission fleet for use on their job sites. I want to thank Senator King for sponsoring this bill, and I urge your support in passing 692. Thank you.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is John McClellan. I'm Vice President for Government Affairs and the Chief Economist for the American Rental Association. We're the national trade association that represents the equipment rental industry. I think that Senator King, and thank you for sponsoring this legislation, and my colleagues have already talked a little bit about the fact that this equipment is available, but it costs a little bit more. That's true. And at our trade show that we recently had in Orlando, Florida, it was very interesting to walk around the show floor and see just how much of this equipment is now available from a number of different manufacturers. So it's not just a single manufacturer and not just a single type of equipment, but there is just lots of stuff out there right now. And rental companies are also being asked by their customers who have, are environmentally conscious to provide this equipment. But the issue is the cost. And I want to just make a comment on that aspect. It's not only the initial cost or the original acquisition cost of the equipment, but it's also the life cycle cost of having the equipment. So what does it cost to actually own and operate this equipment over the life cycle of the asset? And that's something that's very important. And right now it's something that we just don't know, and we cannot, don't have a good estimate of that. And so putting in the provisions of Senate Bill 692 would really help companies like United Rentals and others that are ready and willing to bring this equipment into their fleet, give them the opportunity to do that so we can really understand what the life cycle cost of having this equipment in the fleet are. Appreciate any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Matthew Boley of RWL on behalf of Greenland Technologies Corporation and their heavy brand of all electric industrial equipment in support of the bill. This legislation will drive demand for lower and zero emission electric machinery. However, this legislation will not just help us stimulate demand for this equipment, but also help us grow green manufacturing jobs in Maryland. Greenland Technologies and Heavy Core is beginning to produce zero emission heavy machinery right here in Maryland in White Marsh, Baltimore County. Greenland is producing all electric zero emission loaders, excavators, and forklifts at this new facility. Greenland currently employs 5 Marylanders in White Marsh and is planning to expand to 4 dozen more green manufacturing jobs in the near term. This underscores the potential benefits to Maryland that this tax credit can deliver, not just the promise of lower emission levels in Maryland, but more green manufacturing jobs in Maryland as well. I urge a favorable report on this legislation.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Thank you. That concludes the hearing on the bill.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You bet. Thank you.
The next bill is Senator Zucker, Senate Bill 624.
Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, Senator Craig Zucker here on Senate Bill 624. Colleagues, it's an honor to be here also with one of our colleagues, Carol McDermott. She's the administrator for the Montgomery County House delegation. I'm sorry, House and Senate delegation, but primarily Senate delegation. But it's interesting. I don't know if you all remember watching Monday Night Football. It was right after I think it was the day after New Year's. And I remember watching football with my children when we saw the horrific incident involving Damar Hamlin with the cardiac arrest. And I was able to shield, for the most part, my kids from seeing what was going on television. But with that said, it still doesn't shield Marylanders and the rest of people in the United States from having cardiac arrest, and often they're having them, whether it's at sports facilities or restaurants. So this bill is not only in honor of and recognition of that, but really in honor of Carol McDermott and her story. But I think in the Maryland General Assembly, we have an opportunity to change and also save lives. And what this bill does is, this is regarding automated external defibrillators. And what it does is it provides a tax credit for restaurants who make over a certain amount. That allows a tax credit for them to benefit if they get one of these AEDs. We believe that restaurants will benefit from this because the cost of having someone pass away at their restaurant is a shock, not only to the families, but also to the people that are patronizing the restaurant. But it also is an opportunity for the restaurants to do the right thing, where they have an opportunity to be right there and help save someone's life. So this is really, I believe, a bill that will help save lives, all while encouraging restaurants to do the right thing. So with that, I'll turn it over to my panel and Ms. McDermott.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Zucker. Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, Joe Shea, my dear heart husband, was a joyful man who was not ready for his life to end. He was a Reiki master who helped Congressman Jamie Raskin during the first fight for his life. He rode motorcycles with Senator Astle and was a student pilot. He taught Hapkido, gun safety, and scuba diving. He was an officiant who united many couples in marriage, including our 2 daughters. He was a lot of fun, a loving, honorable, courageous, good man. He was a victim of sudden cardiac arrest. There was not an AED available in the restaurant. He did not survive. Damar Hamlin is a joyful young man, a talented athlete who gives so generously to his community, a good man. He was a victim of sudden cardiac arrest. There was an AED available. He did survive. About 1,000 people a day die from sudden cardiac arrest, more than outnumber deaths from cancers, house fires, assault with firearms, traffic accidents, diabetes, and suicides combined. Cedars-Sinai Heart Institute compares compared to Caucasians, African Americans face twice the rate of cardiac arrest and are an average of 6 years younger. The Maryland Restaurant Association website says the restaurant industry is the most diverse industry in America. The patrons that support the Maryland restaurants are a beautifully diverse population who spent over $15 billion in restaurants in 2021. According to MIMS, the cost of AEDs varies from $500 to $1,700. The cost to individuals, families, and the state from someone who can be hospitalized for weeks, even months, because they did not receive a timely shock is exponentially more. Please incentivize Maryland restaurant owners to have an AED available so people like my Joe can survive. It is a very small price to pay to protect the owners, employees, and patrons that keep the restaurants open. Thank you. And a little public service announcement. In each of our buildings here on campus at the security entrance, there is an AED, and there's one on every floor of the State House. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Killo. I am a paramedic and an ER nurse and a friend of Carol's, and she had asked me to come do a quick demonstration of just how easy it is to use the AEDs. This would be what the restaurant would have in there that you guys would be approving to provide the tax bill for. So just want to give you a quick 1-minute demo on how easy these machines are to use. And without these around, people have less than a 5% chance of surviving sudden cardiac arrest. So it really is as simple as turning these machines on and doing what they tell you to do. And Carol's going to be my mannequin today.
Stay calm, check responsiveness, call for help. Attach adhesive pads to patients for a check.
You would open the machine, there'll be pads in an envelope. You open them up and you stick them to the person's chest. I would say real light, you would have the clothes off. Put them on. The machine is telling you everything you need to do. It's talking to you. It's showing you lights.
Attach adhesive, don't touch patient, analyzing.
It analyzes the person's heart. You don't have to figure anything out. And you can't hurt anybody with this.
Don't touch patient, analyzing. Shock advised. Don't touch patient.
This is a trainer. It's a demo. It won't really deliver electricity. You press the button, it shocks the person, it walks you through CPR. It'll allow you to do CPR for 2 minutes, come back, analyze again, and deliver another shock if necessary. So they're simple to use. As Carol pointed out, this affects 1,000 people a day. 950 of them do not survive because we don't have AEDs in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh. Yeah, we have one more witness, the virtual witness. Yes, sir. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Please proceed.
Thank you for the opportunity to present virtually. I was actually seeing patients this afternoon, and I just got home to rush for this session. My name is Sammy Zachary. I'm the medical director of the Cardiac Intensive Care Unit at Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center. I also serve as the governor-elect of the Maryland chapter of the American College of Cardiology. So that represents about 200 cardiologists and about 1,200 cardiovascular professionals in the state. And we're in support of this measure. We believe expanding AED access will save lives. I've probably taken over more than 1,000 patients in the cardiac ICU that have had cardiac arrest. I gotta be honest with you, patients who have not had prompt CPR and AED use, I've never seen them in clinic afterwards. I've seen them in other settings. Perhaps maybe they're now in a nursing home needing full-time care because of really bad brain injury. Or I've seen them in the hospital coming in with just complications of their cardiac arrest, but I've never seen them in the clinic. On the other hand, those who receive prompt AED defibrillation, those patients can walk out of the hospital and go back to lead productive lives. I just recently saw a patient who is his PhD level type job, and he's doing his normal thing as if nothing happened a few weeks later. I know that may be the most optimistic scenario, but it's not rare. These AEDs save lives. A $500 tax credit should help make the cost more affordable for businesses, and we're happy to support this. Thank you for your time, senators.
Thank you very, very much. Please go
Mr.
ahead.
Vice Chairman, I just wanted to, it was interesting. I was just talking offline with Ms. McDermott. I just wanted to thank and salute Senator Jennings. I know he's done a lot of work in this area, and I just wanted to publicly recognize that.
Great, thank you. Senator Jennings?
Thank you. Appreciate that, Senator. One question on the bill. You and I did have a conversation over the winter about it. Similar to like fire extinguishers and first aid kits in restaurants, the businesses usually don't buy those because they need maintenance. So they actually hire companies like Zentas and Z Medical and stuff to provide it. They just pay a fee. With this, making sure you have a battery charge and all that, the bill looks like it's strictly purchase. Is there a way we can add, rental, or I'm trying to figure out how you would do the service, but there are companies that provide that as a service. Because I think most places would do that instead of purchasing.
Yeah, I know I've been working very closely with the restaurant association, so maybe you, some of the folks here, you, me, and the restaurant association can just huddle and figure it out. And then obviously with the wisdom of the committee, but happy to talk to you offline.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I could just add to that. So the AEDs have come such a long way. You're right, the option absolutely exists, but buying them outright, my professional opinion, is the way to do it. The maintenance that's required is getting new pads and batteries once every 5 years, and that's absolutely all the maintenance there is.
Thank you. Senator Jennings, any other questions? No. Okay, thank you. Yes, Senator Sally.
I want to say, this is something that I know general industry make sure that they have, make sure that people are trained by number. So if they have 50 people, they'll have at least 2 or 3 people that are qualified, trained, and then they have that training through OSHA, and they do it like every 2 years to make sure. But this is something I know is really important to them, and I know it's really important to restaurants too. So I want to thank the good senator for this good bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, members of the committee? Going once, going twice? Okay, thank you. We have one other witness, Melvin Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Melvin Thompson, representing the Restaurant Association of Maryland. And we had submitted written testimony yesterday by the witness sign-up deadline, and our position was favorable with amendments. We had some concerns we were trying to address regarding training. Since that time, I've had conversations with Senator Zucker. He did reach out to the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems. They had some concerns about the amendments that we were proposing. And so instead, I am withdrawing the part of our position that mentions with amendments, and instead we will be just straight up favorable on this bill. We certainly do appreciate the tax credit incentive approach that Senator Zucker has taken on this as opposed to a mandate, and we're happy to support this, encourage our restaurants to take advantage of it if you pass it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Jennings.
Melvin, just to follow up to my question earlier, do you find that restaurants would go for a purchase or I'm trying to think of the way, not a rental, but using a service to provide it?
We've had conversations, Senator, thank you for the question, with some of our restaurants who are doing this already, and they have purchased. And Mr. Kelo is correct. The maintenance usually involves just the changing of the batteries and the pads. And if you are a facility with children, also making sure that you have pads that are small enough for children as well.
Okay.
I think we're done.
Thank you, sir. Just waiting to be dismissed.
We were having an extensive discussion of your withdrawn amendments. So the next bill is 640, Senator Jackson. Oh, there is? Yeah, he was listening. He had already testified. I'd like to mention before we start, Senator, sit down and bring your folks up. What I was talking to Senator Gazzoni about is there was an announcement. Sorry, He announced on the floor today that we're gonna have a hard stop at 5. That has changed. We're gonna continue, we're gonna keep this hearing going until we finish all the bills that are on the agenda. We're not gonna have a voting session, but we are gonna have a voting session at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you, Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Michael Jackson, District 27. On behalf of Senate Bill 640, Senate Bill 640 exempts electricity use for agricultural purposes from the state sales and use tax. This exemption would include activities relating to the raising of livestock, preparation of soil and planting, servicing, harvesting, storing, cleaning, drying, and transportation of seeds and crops. As you all know, residential electricity use and electricity used for manufacturing are already exempt. This legislation just extends the exemption out to manufacturing for agricultural purposes and will provide a great benefit to Maryland's family farmers. These small family farmers have multiple meters attached to their farms and subsequently have to pay the sales and use tax. The ask here is just to bring in the small farms that have multiple meters to exempt them from paying taxes altogether. As we all know, Maryland depends on our local farmers and the benefits of their labor. These local farmers face hard consequences in competing with the larger agricultural manufacturing operations. This bill comes from a place of trying to give them an added chance to compete and to survive. As times have progressed, the challenges of local family farming have been exacerbated by the myriad of factors, and this legislation is a small step to ensuring success in generational farming in Maryland. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the committee, you will receive an amendment that will set this at 2 years so that we can keep an eye on what progress a piece of legislation such as this will bring about. So the chair asked for the 2-year sunset on this. With that, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, we ask for a favorable report, and my panel is here to present and to answer the technical questions that may come about. So.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Paula Linthicum, a farmer from District 14. We grow corn, wheat, and soybeans near Laytonsville. Thank you to Senator Jackson for sponsoring this bill. About a year ago, I sat before this committee and testified on SB 800, and I'm here again today because the proposed sales tax exemption is important. It's important to our family farm and to farms across the state that produce food. Farm expenses impact food prices, and that's important to all of us. Our family supports SB 640, adding electricity used on farms to the existing list of farm exemptions to the state's sales and use tax. We appreciate the cost savings it would yield. We have 2 electric meters on our farm. One at the grain bins where we store our grain, and that's where our farm shop is located. That's billed at non-residential rates. The other meter is just across the way, and that's at our farmhouse, which is billed at residential rates. It's the same parcel of land. We produce food in both areas. September to January is the peak usage period for us. In September and October of 2022, our electric bills were $8,500. And sadly, our peak usage time falls when the higher winter usage rates exist, which are October through through mid-May approximately. I went back this morning and I counted up, we paid $751.32 in sales tax on our electricity in 2022. And you know, we're really small compared to some farmers who farm a lot more acres than us. So this exemption is really meaningful to us and farmers across the state. And our family urges you to give a favorable report for SB 640. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Thompson, here today on behalf of the Maryland Grain Producers Association in support of this very important piece of legislation. The Maryland Grain Producers represents the farmers who grow corn, wheat, barley, and sorghum across the state. You heard one of our farmers, Mrs. Linthicum, talk about grain dryers. And I did an informal poll, and it does seem as though a lot of the farmers who have grain dryers are on commercial meters because it is separate from their home. And talking to several of them, it seems as though this would save them between $12 and $1,800 a year, depending on the size of their facility. I will note that other agricultural inputs are already exempt from the sales and use tax, and manufacturing is already exempt from the sales and use tax for electricity. So when our farmers are drying down the grain, they are paying the sales and use tax on that electricity. But then when we take it to the feed mill and they are grinding up that grain to feed to the animals, they are exempt from the sales and use tax. So we look at this as just kind of a common sense thing, making it come in line with the other agricultural inputs, and would urge your favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Grayson Middleton. I'm Government Affairs Manager for Delmarva Chicken Association. We're the 1,600 member trade organization representing the meat chicken growers, companies, and allied businesses on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And we're here today in support of Senate Bill 640. This bill would essentially correct an oversight in tax law that would make sales and use tax exemption on electricity fair and beneficial for farmers across the state. For years, the state has legislated under the philosophy that inputs for food production and manufacturing should not be taxed. This includes electricity for farming operations on a residential meter, as well as the large processing plants that harvest our chickens. Unfortunately, this exemption does not cover farming operations under a commercial rate. And since 2010, it has become required by electric suppliers that our chicken growers tie their chicken houses to a commercial meter, separate from the residential one. One of the greatest input costs to our chicken growers is electricity. The average electric bill on a Maryland chicken farm is around $30,000. This means this legislation could amount to an average savings of $1,800 per grower. These are savings that can be used to make upgrades to farms, implement additional best management practices, or just pay for their children's sports equipment. Let's level the playing field and give this group of hardworking growers the same exemption as their peers and the companies that harvest the birds they raise. We urge a favorable report on SB 640. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau, and we're here in support of Senate Bill 640. I'll pretty much talk about that, my farm in Frederick County is the barn and everything is tied to my house meter. So, and my house meter is residential and I don't pay taxes. So my whole farm, I don't pay any sales and use tax on my electricity, even though I am a farm. However, we do have our larger farms or larger parcels or even not even more than 40 or 50 acres. But if the house is here and the building is way over here, there's no way to tie to that one meter. And so they have to put a second meter in. Or as Grayson talked about with the poultry, they're required to put in a separate meter. And so what we're trying to do is level the playing field. I did look through the comptroller's documents and read in one of the sections of law currently that talks about the Maryland law exempts sales of the following items for non-residential or commercial use: electricity, fuel, and other utilities used to operate machinery or equipment predominantly used in a production activity. The challenge of it is when you dig in deep into what does production activities to stand for, it's not clearly defined on whether agriculture fits there or not. And that's why we're currently not receiving it. And so this bill is to just make it ironclad that agriculture is manufacturing and should be exempt just like other manufacturing are. So we asked for a favorable report. We worked on the fiscal note. I think it's a little high. I don't think it's as near as impactful as the note says, because 100% of the farms, like Ms. Linthicum talked about, she already has a residential. I have the residential, so the vast majority of the farms already get tax exempt. It's just those extra meters that we're working on. So
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, as Mr. Ferguson mentioned, I know our cross file in the House, they are working on that fiscal note. So
we wish them good luck. Questions from members of the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 640. We now will go to Senate Bill 694. Senator Jennings, you want to invite up your panelists?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee, Senator J.B. Jennings, Presenting Senate Bill 694. I'd like to first start and thank Hillary from Department of Natural Resources for being here. It's good to have the departments here testifying and giving us their input. Quick review on this bill. As you know, the Department of Natural Resources owns hundreds of thousands of acres of land throughout the state. Sometimes it's advantageous to kind of swap some land with private property owners or vice versa. Sometimes something might have been built on state land and they need to kind of swap it back and forth. What this bill does is it simplifies the process by which the Department of Natural Resources, under certain circumstances, may exchange property that it owns for private property while still requiring the final disposition of that exchange property to be approved by the Board of Public Works. The circumstances include: one, the property cannot exceed 5 acres. And two, the owner of the private property requesting the exchange pays all costs associated with the exchange. This includes legal fees, boundary relocations, surveying, engineering, and recordation costs. Last year, I brought this bill in, very similar to this, Senate Bill 974. It received favorable report out of this committee and made it over to the House. Unfortunately, got stalled over there in House rules. Since that time, DNR has gone back, worked with my office, and done a good job of refining it. And there have been a couple changes. I'll just kind of mention those. It moved the land exchange from the state finance and procurement article to the DNR article. It increased property owned by the state from 2 to 5 acres. And it eliminates the approval of the Legislative Policy Committee and General Assembly, but it still does have to go through the Board of Public Works. That is the bill, and I'll take any questions, or I can turn it over to my
Ms. Bell,
panelists.
Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Hillary Bell, and I'm the Director of the Land Acquisition and Planning Unit at the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. As the Senator mentioned, the department owns over 500,000 acres of land throughout the state. Some of those acquisitions date back to the early 1900s. So as you can imagine, with all that land, there are significant boundaries that we maintain. And there are instances where a land exchange is beneficial to the department in order to improve boundary line management for our managing units. That's state parks, forests, forestry, wildlife management, wildlife and heritage service, or addressing a small encroachment. Sometimes property owners have purchased land from a previous owner, and there's an outbuilding or a structure inadvertently that was built on department lands. So, these land exchanges are advantageous to both the department and the private landowners. So Senate Bill 694 just authorizes the department to use a more streamlined process to work through these land exchanges in certain circumstances, as the Senator mentioned. So completing these smaller land exchanges in a more timely manner will assist the department in improving our boundary line management throughout the state. And so for those reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report.
thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That bill, and we will now go to, I'm sorry, oh, she's not, Senator Carter's not here yet? She's on her way, okay. We'll give her a couple minutes, and okay. We will be hearing. Yeah, we'll wait a couple minutes for Senator Carter. And yeah, that's fine. Very peaceful.
Yes.
Absolutely. We are Senator Benson was entertaining us as we were awaiting your arrival. So thank you, Senator Carter.
Thank you. I know you want to get out of here. In fact, I was looking at the time and wondering if you were still going to hear from me. I'm going to be very, very short. I cannot compete with Senator Benson. I'm not a singer and I'm not that engaging. However, this is a wonderful bill that I brought last year and it passed unanimously out of the Senate of Maryland. I want to say that I want to take credit working with individuals on both sides of the aisle for bringing a bill that had to do with gun safety, that enjoyed the support of everyone in this body. All this bill is the gun safety bill that basically gives a refundable tax credit up to $250 for the purchase of a firearm safety device. I think it's super important. We passed a bill on the floor earlier this session, the Kayla Strotter Act. So I had intimately involved this session with a family whose child got access to a gun, a child got access to a gun and killed a teenager in my district. It just highlights the need for why guns need to be secure and why the only tool that we use to ensure that shouldn't be penalization. It ought to be incentive. We ought to incentivize people to securely store their guns. And I think this is a wonderful step in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for Senator Carter? We have several, thank you. We have several witnesses signed up. We have Mark Panak, John Pica, and Matthew Pica.
I know that Mark Pennick is in JPR. He might have thought this was in there.
I understand. And then we have a virtual witness or? Yep. Great. So please proceed.
All right. Here we are. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Pica from Pica and Associates, testifying on behalf of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, or NSSF. They are the trade association for America's hunting and recreational shooting sports, who are in favor of Senate Bill 655. NSSF would like to thank Senator Carter for introducing this bill. They also consistently encourage gun owners to safely handle and securely store firearms through the Project Child Safe program. NSS has given away 40 million safety gun lock devices through law enforcement and retail stores to guarantee the safe handling of firearms. We believe a tax credit will be an appropriate incentive for gun owners to purchase safety devices, and that a tax credit of $250 would cover the majority of reasonably priced safety devices. On behalf of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, we respectfully urge a favorable report, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Pica? Thank you. And then we have another witness online. Nicholas DiTello. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. I just wanted to start with applauding Senator Carter for this effort. By no means do I want anyone to think that we're not appreciative of being kind of thought of with this bill. My name is Nicholas DiTello. I'm a Maryland constituent, student, and civil rights advocate. I frequently find myself testifying against bills, usually because in Annapolis with the MGA, because usually what I found is that the new legislation that we have each year, it tends to heavily impact firearm ownership in a negative sense. Doesn't really hurt crime. It usually a lot of concerns that I would expect to kind of hit in the bills don't get through, yada, 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 rinse and repeat. The point is, I've been impacted by a lot of these bills in a negative light. For example, the personally made firearm bill last year, that personally impacted me. I had to destroy several prints that I made. But to be specific to the bill, though, again, this is a really helpful bill. I think, unlike all that yada yada, all the things that I was going on and on about, that stuff tends to be very complicated. This bill is very simple. It just requires the state police to refund the mix my bills up. It would be a $250 tax credit towards safely storing firearms. That's really hard to not understand for the layman. Like, just you buy a safe, you get a refund. not game of shoots and ladders. You are promoting safety. I honestly think this bill will have an impact in Maryland and save lives. So for all those reasons, I recommend a favorable report of Senate Bill 655.
Thank you very, very much. Are there any questions? Yes. Yes, I see you. Senator, please.
So how does this legislation affect the part of the legislation from Senate Bill 858 that we heard today on the floor of the Senate?
Well, it could appear to be somewhat duplicative in parts, but I would just submit to this committee that I sponsored this bill last year. It passed unanimously. And we don't know what the fate of another bill that might have some overlapping interest is. So I would ask for a favorable report on this bill.
So Senator, what you're saying is that
There's a part of that bill that this has been incorporated in that bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? That concludes the hearing on this bill.
But here's Mr. Pennick, sorry.
I'm sorry, you want to say something? My apologies.
I know you all want to get the sentence passed. We won't.
No, my apologies, my apologies. Go ahead.
My apology, Mr. Chairman. I got here a little late, Mr. Cummins, JPR. My name is Mark Pennick. I am the president of Maryland Show Issue. That is the premier gun rights organization in Maryland. We wholeheartedly support this bill. We are wholeheartedly in favor of safe storage. This bill will do more than ban and imprison legislation that we have here. This will actually encourage people to engage in the practice of self-storage. And that is vitally important for all the reasons everyone in this committee is well aware. So people have an invested interest in this and getting $250 back. They will in fact buy these devices, and more likely than not, since they have them, they will use them. And that's the whole point of this legislation. So it's a new and fresh approach to safe storage, one that we wholeheartedly endorse. So I urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Any questions, members of the committee?
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing. And now it's the Senator Carosa show. Finally, we have her for two bills, and the first one is Senate Bill 493. And please bring up if you have panels to join you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the distinguished Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. And I am honored to present this bill to you. I'm Senator Mary Beth Carosa for the record, and I represent Wycomico, Worcester, and Somerset counties. And I'm presenting to you Senate Bill 493, which is a commission to study trauma center funding in Maryland. And it's a very important bill. I know we're at the end of a long day, but it's something that really asks for the committee's attention. It would establish a commission to study the adequacy of trauma funding across Maryland for operating capital and workforce costs, which according to the fiscal note can be managed with existing resources and has no state or local impact. Typically, hospitals do not have the ability to adequately manage all forms of traumatic injury or staff the required subspecialists needed for such intensive care. When a hospital does commit to being a trauma center, they are required by statute to be staffed and equipped to swiftly treat severe life-threatening conditions such as falls, motor vehicle crashes, gunshot wounds, resuscitation, and other life-saving services. Trauma surgeons, other specialists, ancillary support staff are required to be in-house or on call 24 hours a day in a trauma center. All of this means that trauma centers require significant resources to operate effectively. I just would like to share a little bit of background, and I know some of the members know this, but it may be new information for others or whoever's listening at this point. But back in 2003, the Maryland General Assembly passed legislation that created the Maryland Trauma Physician Services Fund. to aid Maryland's trauma system by reimbursing trauma physicians for uncompensated care losses and by raising Medicaid payments to 100% of the Medicare rate when a Medicaid patient receives trauma care at a designated trauma center. In the 20 years that have passed, there has been no comprehensive review of this fund, despite the industry growing and evolving. Unfortunately, the reason this legislation is before you and is urgent is because we know that the fund is not as effective as it was intended to be. Tidal Health Peninsula Regional is the Eastern Shore's only trauma center, and it serves 500,000 residents and 3 million visitors each year, playing an integral part of the Maryland Trauma Center system, and it is critically underfunded. At last estimate, Tidal Health receives from the Maryland Trauma Physician Services Fund less than 10% of the total cost it requires to remain a trauma center. There is a sense of urgency here. You will see in your bill file folder that this legislation is supported by numerous health organizations. And as you can see at the table, also supported by the Maryland State Firemen's Association. I know the members may know this, but to remind you, the state of Maryland is home to 10 trauma centers. They provide vital, life-saving care every day. I'm sure all of us have examples. My own example is my aunt and uncle who have been saved by a trauma system. And I just also want to point out that our Maryland State Trooper who was shot on Monday night was taken to Tidal Health. I share with you the urgency of a thorough review of the current trauma center. It is needed, and it is needed now. So I truly appreciate your kind attention at this late hour, and I respectfully ask for a swift and favorable report on Senate Bill 493. And I'd like to, if you would hear from the rest of my panelists.
Yeah, thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and Senators, for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Stephen Leonard. I am the CEO of Tidal Health. Tidal Health is the oldest, largest, and most complex healthcare system on Maryland's Eastern Shore. We were founded in 1897, and Tidal Health has hospitals in Maryland and Delaware with 30 different sites of service and joint ventures across 7 counties. At Tidal Health Peninsula Regional, our flagship hospital in Salisbury, we provide complex services in a rural setting. In addition to being one of the handful of dedicated trauma providers, we're the only trauma center on Maryland's Eastern Shore. With that said, our trauma service is in jeopardy, and this bill is one avenue to ensure proper care remains for all of Maryland. Why do I say that? Tidal Health Peninsula Regional is one of the busiest trauma centers based on activations in the state of Maryland. In the past 4 years, residents from every single one of Maryland's 24 counties are treated in our trauma center as trauma patients. In the summer, more than 8 million people visit the shore. Accidents do happen. Therefore, trauma services at Tidal Health Peninsula Regional are not just an Eastern Shore concern. This should be on the radar of every single elected representative as their constituents, as our community members in Maryland have used our trauma center in Salisbury. It is a greater than 2-hour ambulance drive to the nearest trauma center. The drive time will impact lives and access to timely care. Tidal Health is advocating for proper trauma funding through several avenues, including Senate Bill 493. As you know, the Trauma Fund was developed in 2003, and at this point in time, it no longer meets the need of the systems in Maryland. And since that time, a comprehensive review has not occurred, and it is needed. At Tidal Health Peninsula Regional, it costs more to run the trauma program than we receive from the fund. There's a significant delta. We fully support Senate Bill 493 and encourage a favorable review. We want to ensure that Maryland has the most contemporary trauma funding, and this can only happen through the establishment of this commission. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, Vice Chair and the members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. My name is Zach Garciaga. I am the Adult Trauma Program Manager at Johns Hopkins Hospital, a registered nurse, and the current co-chair of the Legislative Committee of TraumaNet, which is the statewide collaborative for trauma centers. I'm here to express support for SB 493 for both Johns Hopkins and TraumaNet. And I also want to thank the sponsor for bringing this bill to attention. There, not to be duplicative, but there are 10 trauma centers within the state that provide life-saving care every day. And it's required by statute that trauma centers respond and have on-call and in-house support staff to be able to handle those situations. Situations that range from traumatic injury like motor vehicle crashes, gunshot wounds, falls. And all these clinicians have to maintain highly trained competency in being able to care for these patients. Within our health system, we treat approximately 7,500 of these patients annually between our 4 centers. 1 level 1 adult trauma center, 2 level 2 centers, and 1 pediatric center. This crucial part of the healthcare system has not been thoroughly evaluated since 2003, since when the Maryland General Assembly enacted legislation to create the Maryland Physician Service Fund to reimburse physicians for uncompensated care. The trauma fund was designated to reimburse 65% of on-call trauma in 2003, and today reimburses 40%. SB 493 again creates the commission to review the important part of the state's healthcare system and ensure there's adequate support to treat and care for trauma patients. For this reason and more, I urge a favorable report for SB 493. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for your time and support of University of Maryland Capital Region Health and the ongoing transformation of healthcare delivery in Prince George's County and the Southern Maryland region. I'm Dr. Tamika R. Chenard. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Medical Officer. But more importantly, I'm a practicing board certified emergency physician. And today I'm here to discuss the need for funding to cover unreimbursed costs for our trauma programs in the state, in particular Capital Region Health. We see just under 3,000 trauma cases per year with a 95.5% survival rate. We're one of 4 level 2 trauma centers in the state and the only trauma center in Prince George's County, as well as the second busiest in the state, second only to Maryland Shock Trauma in Baltimore. The trauma cases we see have high severity. Number of blunt and penetrating wounds from car accidents, gunshot wounds is twice the national average rate for these types of injuries. The high severity level has impact on the clinical and financial resources expended to operate our trauma center. Trauma center is also required to have the availability of trauma physicians, orthopedic physicians, neurosurgeons, critical care physicians, and anesthesiologists around the clock at any given time. All of these factors have led to Capital Region incurring nearly $13 million in unreimbursed trauma program costs annually. And trauma services are critical for every community. For hospitals that do provide trauma care, like Capital Region, this is a significant financial burden, particularly given the rising costs of physicians and nurses post-pandemic. Capital Region remains committed to being good stewards of the state's investment in the transformation of healthcare at Prince George's County. And on behalf of our 2,000 plus member workforce and the patients we care for, I thank you for your time and your support for this critical funding.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Isn't it wonderful just being here all night? My name is Bob Phillips. I am the legislative chair for the Maryland State Firefighters Association, MSFA. Here on behalf of the MSFA. First, I'll speak. This panel is speaking about all the things that they do inside the red brick buildings and all the services they provide. I'll give a little different perspective on that. State of Maryland has the best emergency medical system in the nation. We're second to none. From the time the call goes into a call center to the dispatch, the quality of the people that respond, and the care that is given pre-hospital. And then we take it to the best hospitals in the nation. We've got a land transportation system and an air transportation system everybody else wants to have. We need to have that looked at. We're funding it. We're looking at other ways to fund it right now. But the trauma centers, just like you've heard, they haven't been looked at in a long time. We cannot let this part, this cog in the wheel, lapse. It has to be fixed. It has to be brought up to date. Again, everybody else looks at the state of Maryland because we have such a good system. And we have a good system because all the partners sit at the same table at the same time and work out their issues. And I would like to see this panel let that continue to happen. We're fully in favor of this bill. We just have two things we'd like to ask as amendments or recommendations. Number one, we represent the people that work in the field. And these people interact with the trauma centers. When our people show up in a trauma center, we work with their people. We'd like to have a seat at the table to discuss this funding, to make sure it's all encompassing. We also would like to see that monies that I'm sure this funding is going to come up with, or study is going to come up with some funding. We'd like to see that totally separated from other monies they're presently receiving from other appropriations. Make it separate and give them something additional.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Senator Carrozza or members of this panel? I don't think so. Thank you very much. We have several other witnesses who've signed up, and if they are here, they should come up to the table and decide the order in which they want to speak and introduce themselves.
Good evening. Dr. Ted Delbridge. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems. The hour is late. You all have heard a lot this afternoon, and you have my written testimony, so I'll be brief. Trauma centers that are the anchor to the trauma system incur costs, not just those related to deliver care, but those related to maintaining a universal state of readiness. It's been decades since we've comprehensively evaluated the manner in which we fund a system that we all, each of us, might depend on in the blink of an eye. Therefore, MEMS is happy to be a collaborative partner in such an effort, and we urge a favorable report. Thanks.
Ben Steffen, Executive Director of the Maryland Healthcare Commission. The Maryland Healthcare Commission administers the Maryland Trauma Physician Services Fund. The commission supports the Commission to Study Trauma Care. I would note that the Trauma Fund was created to supplement the cost of trauma care, standby, on-call, uncompensated care, and Medicaid underpayment. The priorities have changed over the years. The existing statute is very specific on those formulas. And this is an appropriate time for us to look at the formulas and possibly change those, as well as perhaps the level of funding that is obtained through automobile registrations and registration renewals. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Christy Snedeker. I'm the Vice President of the R. Adams Cali Shock Trauma Center. I'm pleased to be here today in support of Senate Bill 493. The R. Adams Cali, established by law, is the core element of the state's emergency medical system and the state's primary adult resource center, servicing upwards of 6,000 adult trauma patients a year with a 97% survival rate. The R. Adams Cali Shock Trauma Center is the state's only freestanding trauma hospital and takes care of those patients with due diligence. We serve a vital statewide clinical resource for the most critically ill and injured, and we are the safety net for the state, receiving 30% of our volume from my fellow trauma centers that testified here today. As a result, the Shock Trauma Center has unique operating and financial requirements that distinguish us from other Maryland trauma centers and are the basis of the state operating support through the Maryland Emergency Medical System Operating Fund. We're proud of that statutory designation as the park and the core element, and are happy to be here alongside of our MSOF partners in MIMS, MSP Aviation Command, MSFA, and MIFRE. Maryland's trauma and EMS system serves as a model for emergency medical care, both nationally and internationally, and we collectively are appreciative of this committee and to the General Assembly as a whole to help us identify a path forward that will preserve Maryland's world-renowned trauma system for generations to come. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you. Are there questions, Senator Elfreth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all very much for being here. And for members of the PSTE subcommittee, we were kind of confronted with a similar issue when it comes to the long-term sustainability of the MSOF fund. So if one of you could address that just for the full committee, I'd appreciate that. And then similarly, what's your estimation of the need for this fund, the unmet need for this fund, and approximately what do you think is a reasonable investment the state should be making in this fund?
Well, I'll tackle the MSOF question first. So for those of you who we haven't connected with, the MSOF is the Emergency Medical Services Operation Fund. It's funded in two parts, one with a $29 biannual surcharge on motor vehicle registrations and $7.50 on moving violation court costs. The fund has experienced hardship, if you will, over the last couple of years related to the pandemic and delays in motor vehicle registrations, things like that. And the DLS analysis of the fund's future just a few weeks ago recognized that it was probably going to become insolvent in fiscal year 2024. So we're actively working with the administration to find short-term solutions and are exploring opportunities for long-term solutions. I'm actually gonna zip out of here and go across the way to the cannabis reform legislative discussion to see if there's an opportunity there to take some of the pressure off the motor vehicle fund. But that's where that stands. And I'll let Ben talk about the.
Thank you.
The trauma, it's kind of a unique situation. The trauma fund actually has a bit of a surplus in it, but the spending formulas dictate how the money is spent. Historically, we had substantial uncompensated care as a result of the ACA. The number of uninsured in the state has fallen. The Medicaid expansion similarly has led to a reduction in uninsured. Those requirements have been reduced. On-call, which is funded directly through the trauma fund, has grown, but the spending formulas in the statute dictate what can be spent. And lastly, standbys is is defined as a Part A Medicare cost. It is rolled into into hospital rates. Hospitals cannot increase their standby costs through HSCRC unless they undergo a full rate review, which puts their entire expenses at risk, which many hospitals are reluctant to do. I would note that historically, Title did not collect any standby cost. They would be eligible for it, but to do that, they would have to undergo a full rate review, which would make their costs subject to potentially some reductions. So understand why they don't do it. But definitely have to look at the formulas moving forward because the needs in 2003 are different than the needs in 2024.
Couldn't agree with you more and support the bill. I guess my question is, coming into PSTE, I was a little shocked by the challenge we have in front of us with the MSOF fund. And I just don't want us to come into this situation with this fund, appreciating there's a surplus and that's in the fiscal note. Thank you, Mr. Steffen. But if you were to estimate the unmet need, reconfiguring the formulas, the need for the trauma centers that we have, what would that look like?
So over the years, there's been discussions about expanding coverage to non-physician providers who render a significant amount of care. I could easily see the fund needing to double in size if we wanted to cover everything.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other? Senator Crocer, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, if I could have Mr. Leonard, Dr. Leonard also comment, because it gets to the senator's question about the fact that there's a surplus that Title Health has not been able to tap.
Sure, please, briefly.
Sure. I definitely appreciate the comments. I think to us as an operator, quite frankly, the trauma fund was conceptualized in a day and age that no longer applies, where there was independent providers and you're paying for call. One of the great shortcomings of it now is that 50% of providers in the country are employed. So the whole paradigm has shifted from an independent, unfunded, like you would unfund a patient didn't have insurance, to now subsidization of providers. As far as the dollar amount, I can tell you for us, it's $17 million for one trauma center. And that's the unfunded. And as far as the full rate application, the HSCRC has had a moratorium on the full rate application. So we would happily apply for one if there wasn't a moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think that concludes the hearing on the bill. Thank you all very, very much. And Senator King is going to take over for the last bill.
Wait to be called.
Senator Carozza, you got the last
Thank
bill of the
you.
show this afternoon.
Thank you,
Senate Bill
Madam Chair.
612.
Okay, and this, I am Senator Mary Beth Carozza for the record, representing Worcester, Wycomico, and Somerset counties. This bill is in Eastern Shore, SB 612 is in Eastern Shore Code Counties maximum hotel rental tax rate alteration. And I would like to point out that my colleagues on the shore, Senator Mounts and Senator Hershey, are co-sponsors and are allowing me to present this bill today. This would simply enable the code counties of the Eastern Shore to set a new hotel rental tax rate of up to maximum 6%. For reference, there are 4 counties on the Eastern Shore that operate under Code Home Rule: Caroline, Kent, Queen Anne's, and Worcester. And these counties are required to collect and distribute the revenues attributable to a hotel located in a municipality to the municipal government in question. I would like to point out that all 4 code counties support this legislation, and there should be letters in your packet. Under current law, the hotel rental tax rate for these counties is capped at 5%. As you can see by the fiscal note, there would be a huge benefit to local government revenue if we allow, again, enabling these code counties to collect 1% more in the hotel rental tax rate. This hotel rental tax rate is a dedicated source of funding for tourism and tourism-related activities, and the Eastern Shore Code counties believe making this minimal increase would be mutually beneficial. Some of you have heard me say this at tourism events, but on average, each dollar invested in tourism marketing generates $31 in visitor spending. And I think, as many of you would agree, our shore tourism is an economic driver for the entire state of Maryland. So I appreciate your kind attention at this late hour and respectfully request for a swift and favorable report on SB 612. And I see that on the screen, we have virtual testimony from Mayor Meehan, from Ocean City, the Commissioner Joe Matresic from Worcester County, and Ocean City Town Manager Terry McGee, who will be very brief. Thank you. And I really appreciate everyone's attention.
Okay, who do you want to put first? We'll go with the mayor.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Budget Taxation Committee. Thank you for allowing us to testify today. I apologize I'm not there with you in person, and will be brief because of the late hour. The town of Ocean City supports Senate Bill 612, which is enabling legislation which would allow Worcester County to raise a hotel rental tax rate from 5% to up to 6%. Rooms tax dollars provide the funds needed to market, support, and grow our only industry, which is tourism. It's also important that these funds cover the general fund costs that are necessary to provide the necessary services to manage our growing season and our expanded visitor population. During summer season, we become the second largest city in the state. 65% of our visitors come from outside Maryland, and the tax revenue generated from tourism benefits not just Ocean City, but the state of Maryland. Our goal is to keep Ocean City a clean, safe, year-round vacation destination. This bill gives us the flexibility to raise the hotel tax to cover these increased costs, and we ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill.
Thank you. Okay. We have Terrence McGeehan.
Am I on?
You're on.
All right, great. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry McGeehan, and I am the city manager of Ocean City. I come before you today to testify in favor of Senate Bill 612. As mentioned, 612 authorizes Eastern Shore Code counties, specifically Caroline, Kent, Queen Anne's, and Worcester County, to increase our hotel rental tax rate from the current maximum of 5% to up to 6%. This is enabling legislation only. Any actual increase to current hotel tax rates in a specific county would still require the unanimous approval of that county's commissioners. The bill is supported by all 4 Eastern Shore counties. The proposed 6% cap is less than the existing 8% cap established for the Western Code counties and remains well below rates for our out-of-state competitors, such as Virginia Beach, which is at 8% plus $2 a night, and Rehoboth Beach, which is at 11%. Increasing the hotel tax cap will give local jurisdictions the funding resources we need to continue to grow our tourism market while maintaining the highest standards for public safety and services. I hope you will issue a favorable report on Senate Bill 612. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Jackson, you have a question? You want to wait to the end? Okay. So then we have Joe Matresic.
Madam Chairman,
Go ahead.
honorable members of the Budget and Taxation Committee. My name is Joe Matresic, and I'm here on behalf of the Worcester County Commissioners who unanimously support SB 612. I'm not going to be redundant. We have reached out to the other code counties that this would affect, and we have unanimous support from them, as you see in their letters. And I'll ask on behalf of the Worcester County Commissioners for a favorable report on SB 612. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to testify. Okay, Senator Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing this piece of legislation. Senator Carrozza, quick question for you. I represent one of these types of counties, but you've only included the Eastern Shore counties. Have you reached out to other counties like Charles County or?
My understanding, when we actually introduced this legislation as a single county, that's when we were informed that we, in order to move forward, needed the approval of the other 4 Eastern Shore Code counties. That was my understanding because this would impact those counties, enabling for those counties.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, if I might. What's interesting, and I would like to discuss it with you further, but what's interesting is I have a piece of legislation for Charles County, a code county, and that I presented before your committee, and the chair reminded me that as a code county, it cannot be a single county. I'd have to have the other counties included that were a code county. So I'll talk to you offline about that, about the opportunity that is presented here. You know, what's good for 4 could be good for more. So,
hey,
yeah,
Senator Benson.
Yes, thank you very much. Are we also talking about Garrett County, which is 8%, and we're also talking about Washington County, that's 6%. Is there?
So
Do we have the same
so this
response?
legislation is very specific. It would only go from 5 to 6%. And if Mr. McGee or if anybody else, I know there was some research done before that, but we were very clear in working on this legislation with our other 4 shore code counties that it was a maximum of 6%. Mr. McGee, did you want to add anything to that? I know you were involved in some of those conversations.
Yeah, the issue is that the way the state law works is it carves out the maximum for a variety of different counties. And so it carves out a different maximum rate for Eastern Shore Code counties, which is currently 5%, versus Western Shore counties, which is currently 8%. And then it has a number of other different rates that are spelled out, maximum rates for various other counties within the state. So last year, when we attempted to increase just Worcester County, we were told we could not just increase Worcester County. It had to apply to all 4 Eastern Shore Code counties.
That are capped at 5%.
That's correct.
Yes, for this piece of legislation, would it have to be subjected to, in order for you all to make this happen, would it be subjected to a public hearing back in each of the counties?
Yes, it would.
Would it have to be a public hearing in order for this to occur? Or would it be? up
You
to
mean
the
if,
discretion
so
of-
this
of the council?
legislation is enabling, and then do you want to walk through the process?
Well,
As
that's
far
not
as if
necessary
they
because-
decide to, is that, you're saying what, if they
Yeah,
decide to
it's not
do it?
necessary to do that today, I don't think. To
This
walk
is
through the
just-
whole process.
Well, I don't want to, prolong this hearing, but I'd be curious to know how that really works. Does it?
So you're saying once they had that enabling authority, and if a county wanted to move forward,
Yes, that's what I'm after.
okay.
I can answer
That's
that.
I think we
Okay,
can do
I'm
some
gonna let
research
the
on that
locals-
before we discuss this for voting and stuff. We'll get more information.
Okay, thank you very
Is that-
much. That would
I
be-
can answer that if you'd like real quick. That yes, it would be subject to a public hearing before the Worcester County Commissioners, and it would take a unanimous vote of the county commissioners to pass the amendment to raise the room tax from 5% to 6%.
So it wouldn't be a public discussion.
No, a public hearing would be held, but then
The ultimate decision.
but the entire, but it would, what's key here is it's a unanimous, so it requires a unanimous vote on the Worcester County Commissioners for that to go from 5% to 6%.
Got it.
And it would,
Thank
it
you.
would, it would take in a unanimous vote of any part of that 1% increase.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Members of the committee, we are going to vote at 10 a.m. promptly tomorrow morning,
I'm dismissed.
says the chair.